Round 2, Provocative Paradigms, the art of disruptive design. Gregory Katz is a daring architect, known for innovative and captivating designs, combining local inspiration with modern methods. His brilliantly contemporary residences grace the media with enthusiasm, like the striking Great Primary Shapes house and his own, House Katz, with its unique and unassuming exterior and equally unique interior. Gregory's designs explore the balance between complexity and playfulness, continuously pushing the boundaries of traditional design. Just when you would expect Greg to zig, he zags. So we've come to realize you never know what to expect with Gregory Katz, and I think that that is his superpower. Joining us from Johannesburg, especially for you today, please help me welcome Gregory to the stage.
Thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Gregory Katz. I'm an architect based in Johannesburg. It's great to be here. It was worth coming just to meet KK Rabani. So the art of disruptive design. I'm quite happy to talk about disruptive design and provocative paradigms and all these sexy terms, because at the heart of it, there's something that I'm actually quite good at, which is making mistakes. You know, there are these 3 Japanese concepts that I came across recently that really resonated with me in thinking about my practice. The first is Shoshin, I think that's how it's pronounced, which is a Buddhist concept that means to approach things with a beginner mindset. So this word that we use, this word called practice, I think that it's the perfect word for what we do as architects. You know, after 30 years of practice, I'm still a novice. I'm learning on every project. I'm practicing. The second Japanese concept is kaizen, which means focusing on small improvements every day. You know, trying to do a little bit better every day. Making architecture is very resource intensive. It's very capital intensive, it's very time intensive, it's so permanent, the stakes are so high. And yet, in order to make breakthroughs, in order to make advancements, architects need to be taking risks and experimenting. And making architecture can be tough, it's stressful. I also love it. The third concept is wabi-sabi, which is that instead of perfection, that we should find beauty in imperfection. And so much of the story that we tell ourselves, that we present to the world on the social media, that you see in the magazines, thanks Scape for hosting this, it's of architecture as this finished, packaged product. But that's not where the disruption lies. That's nice for your portfolio or your Insta feed, but the real cold-face experimentation, it's a lot messier than that. And we really get to see the process behind the product. You know, for me, the process is the product. And so don't expect too much flash today, don't expect too much gloss. Today I want to talk more about the process. So I thought I would tell you a bit about the things that have kept me awake at night, heart palpitating, on the way to making those breakthroughs. I want to talk about these things because they're so verboten, and yet they are the only way that I know to advance design thinking. So a bit of my backstory. I grew up in Joburg. I moved to Cape Town, where I did my architecture undergrad at UCT, and then I spent a couple of years overseas working for some famous architects. The one was Zvi Hecke in Berlin. We built the school, and the other one was in the office of Daniel Libeskind, where I worked in LA. And then I moved to New York, where I got my master's at Columbia University. And here's a pic of me learning to snowboard, learning the art of the graceful fail. I lived in New York City for 8 years, mainly downtown near Canal Street, you know, with its stores full of these exotic materials. And I was living in a commune, come model building workshop with a bunch of guys, and we we were making architecture models for some of the bigger firms in the city. And then 9/11 happened while I was on a backpacking trip in South America, and I came back to Joburg, and I discovered the city reinventing itself, and I got a job working on the Constitutional Courts with Andrew Makin, who some of you may know, and the rest is history. I founded GKA, Gregory Katz Architects. This is a picture of the inside of my studio, more about that later. And one of my first projects were these 3 identical concrete boxes that we built in the suburb in Joburg. And something I learned quite early on is that in order to make good concrete, you need very good shutters, very good molds. And so with the economies of scale of making 3 identical things out of concrete, we were able to source brand new shutters for this job, and that's how you get the pristine concrete finish on the walls. And something else I learned was that, when you're making concrete, you can't chase the walls once you've kind of built them out of brick and then plastered them and then chased them and then plastered them again. So all the drawings had to be incredibly detailed for the reticulation in the walls. And we had a very precise builder. In the other slide deck, there's a photo of the builder. They look very nice. Nice to see these shots again. They've aged quite well as well, because concrete gets that beautiful patina, as it ages. And then we made this fortress-like thing, which is actually a house, unusual looking thing. And this photo still gives me hives. It was a rookie error. Contractors and subcontractors, they're always pushing, because of their cash flows, to get their materials ordered up front. So seeing the aluminium lying on site while it's still under construction like that is just really bad form. Okay, that's that one. And these concrete floors, they're beautiful and polished in this photo, but they were a complete nightmare to make. We chose a very specific aggregate because we didn't want any of the brown hues. We wanted only the blues and greys. So we went to the quarry and we selected the stone. And little did we know that it was like the super, super hard stone. We burned through 3 sets of grinding and polishing blades, and it took literally ground on for weeks, this polishing process. And the client was in tears, and the client's daughter was in tears. And it just took tremendous amounts of bullshit bravado and optimism to convince them that everything would be all right in the end. And those stairs are made from shutters that we repurposed from the site. And this picture just reminds me of the brutality of construction. These are we're literally scarring the earth when we build. And these are the trenches for the raft foundations for my own house. And there's the studio going up. We built the studio on the property first so that I could work from there and keep an eye on the construction site. And it's made of light steel, and I don't know, as a novice in this way of building, I kind of imagined that they would deliver these panels to site and we just move them into position and bolt them together. But this is how the stuff arrived, in lengths with codes printed on them and a set of instructions, and then you feel like, when you're building your kid's toy, and then at the end there are those few pieces left over and a couple of bolts, and you're scratching your head, where were those meant to go? But it was very efficient and quick to make. There were 2 carpenters and 2 general laborers, and we put the thing up in a little over a couple of weeks. And then we clad it in this kind of armadillo skin made of recycled rubber. And that was also a risk. You take more risks when you're building for yourself. Because it's actually a roofing material that we've now applied to the walls. All warranties were voided on pretty much everything in this house. And we used a concrete frame here with one of those coffered slabs. It's a mini coffer, so the slabs are actually a bit thinner than you see in the parking garages. But I really like this kind of parking garage aesthetic. And things always look better when they're incomplete. And then we found these bricks, these special shaped bricks at the local brickyard. And as I always tell architects, you've got to get up from behind your computers and get out there and go to the suppliers and see what's lying around. Because, not only were they super cheap because they didn't know what to do with them, but they also have this very interesting effect. And the lived experience of a house is, you learn things as the author of a place when you experience it over time. So that was also something that I learned here. And we used special imported plywood for the cabinetry, and then the diagonal vinyl on the floors. You can really transform a material if you use it in a new and original way, but this is something that I think would have been very hard to convince a client to let me do. So there's a special pleasure, like designing and then living in your own house. There's also a kind of reckoning because you're confronted by your blind spots every day. But this is like some of the emerging things that happen when you live there, that you notice that the shadows on the ground kind of like follow the diagonal stripes in the floor. The poetry really emerges over time, and then when you're working with concrete, we kind of embraced the roughness of the concrete on this project, very different to the first iteration that you saw. And the stair came out a little bit skew, and we just chopped the surface. And it's actually quite a nice surface to walk on barefoot. And that's the material palette. And even, the small decisions about like where to put the handles on a cupboard are not obvious when you're starting with this beginner mindset. This come to things from the position of not knowing. So we put them in the middle, and then I got all the comments on Instagram saying, your cupboards are definitely going to fall off the hinges, and you're mad. And anyway, they did last, but the only problem is you never know which way those doors are going to open. And then I'm allergic to lintels, so we used filler panels at the top, and the doors have this wonderful full height quality, even though they're just hanging at a normal height. And this question of where to put lintels and where to put windowsills, they seem like obvious questions, and the answers are already out there, and we know that windowsills are at like 1 meter, and that lintels should be at 2.4 and line up with the tops of the doors. But we live on a park, and so I wanted a bit more privacy upstairs, so we put the windowsills a bit higher in this house. Then it became hard to watch the kids playing in the garden, so we built boxes in the corners of every room. But you do get these wonderful views of the sky. The Joburg sky is spectacular. And it seemed logical when we were building the house to continue the column grid, on the patio. And that center column just always felt like we were so hemmed in. And, you're never stuck. You can always pivot. And so we just took it out. With the help of an engineer who came up with that ingenious solution to hang the slab. So we took some rebar and we heated it up so that it expands, and then we welded a plate to the underside of the slab, and then as it cools down, it contracts again and pulls the whole slab into tension, which was a wonderful thing to learn, that you can actually do that. Now I'm going to use that in my next project. And our pool is triangular, which is good for swimming laps and playing. And here's a nursery school that we built, and we used these wind blocks, lots and lots of wind blocks, and the floor is made of porous, no-fines concrete, so no one can slip there. And we kind of thought the kids would climb in and through these columns, and they do, but then the teachers also start storing a lot of their crap in those columns, and now it's just like full of stuff. And there's that unfinished aesthetic that I love so much. And we were really playing with scale quite a lot here. So, the scale of the building is mitigated because you enter at like a half level. It looks like a big dinosaur there. And then there's a slide to take you in. And even the handrails are like super sized so that adults can feel like kids again. And we demolished something on site to make way for the school. And we just kept the rubble there. And we crushed it. And we used it as part of making the playground. And this is a project we did in the Joburg CBD. It's a housing project, affordable housing for 300 units, and we were very inspired by the shwe patterns that you see all over CBD. And we started laying bricks in this header course pattern to get this kind of pixelated variety, and then we did these drawings to show how we were going to make a shwe facade, and there it is at full scale, and you get this really giant, impactful, very economical, just using brick and paint, but it's a landmark in the city. And here we did these drawings to convince the developer that instead of putting 300 small balconies on the outside of the building, we could take that GLA and move it to the inside of the courtyard and combine it with the circulation routes, and make more generous circulation routes that were more than just a way of getting to your apartment. They could become these kind of communal areas. And then we thought, developers are obsessed with laundry and where we're going to put the washing lines. We don't want anyone to see the laundry. And so we told them, okay, we'll do away with the balconies. No one's going to be hanging their laundry on the balconies, but we're going to make this courtyard full of wash lines. And we're going to make a kinetic sculpture out of all the laundry that's hanging there. And it's a really nice feel and is 100% tenanted all the time. There's waiting lists to get in here. And it has, people love it. There's a vibe in that courtyard. People are using the wash troughs, parking their bikes, gathering, having their afternoon sape. And then I've always loved or just wanted to make an arch. And so a client came to us and they said, we want a 200 square meter house, really small, compact house, for a 3-bedroom home for them and their 2 kids. And we called this house the Shape Sorter House because it reminded me of the children's toy, with all the different shaped apertures, and then you're putting the shapes through it. And we made it out of pavers, so you get that really interesting surface texture because it's got the low gauge of the paver and then the nibs sticking out. And it has a triangular entrance wall. What we did was we tinted each of those panes a different tint so that it mitigates heat gain because, the north-facing ones and the west-facing ones need to be a bit darker. But you do know what color the sky is because the south-facing one is just transparent. And it has this kaleidoscopic effect. And the stairs are made of green studded rubber, and they really love the home. And, these are the publication shots. And then during COVID, they ran out of space because they needed to work from home. So we built this little Japanesey pod for them, which is a nice exercise. And these are some elements we designed in the garden. And these are more elements designed in a garden. This is actually a house that we did. It's called The Great Primary Shapes House. And at the time, I was reading a book by Euclid called The Elements. It's a really ancient text on geometrical precision, and became really interested with the idea of using various shapes and how each shape could be designed to suit the function of the room, or the room could be kind of programmed into those specific shapes, so that and just really questioning the idea of living in a rectangle, because we all live in rectangles. So we wanted to ask that question. So there's all these different shapes. Material, and we designed it kind of around this Chinese nettle tree, so the lounge has got this beautiful view. It's a circular hug of a room, and then you look out of this smiley face window at this Chinese nettle tree. And the A-frame, this triangle, really suited the entranceway in surprising ways, because we, trying to put a staircase under a sloping roof like that meant that it had to kind of be angled, and then it just had this wonderful synergy with the entrance and the doorway and how you come into the house. So these are the shots for the magazines. Now I'm going to tell you some horror stories. So you'll see on the drawings, there's a lot of precision here, everything aligns. The alignment of things is very important to the realization of this core concept of this house. And we put up the shutters, and the brickwork was underway at the same time. And I arrive on site one day and I see that. So you see how the base of the triangle no longer intersects perfectly with my hexagon on the corner. And so I send this to the contractor and I say, what WTF? Check the drawings, this is meant to align. So the architects in the room will know that when we do drawings, we often use cut lines because we don't know what the founding conditions are going to be like when we're doing our drawings. And we may dimension the base of that triangle at surface bed level, but when it comes to 10 feet below ground, when you're not working with perpendicular walls, that thing's getting wider and wider, and the contractor's got no dimension to work with, so he hazards a guess how wide that thing should be. So that was a big lesson for me. You've got to dimension these things, or at least ask the question. So what would you have done? Left it? I don't know. I think the architects would have all done what I did, which was insist that it's demolished, which was a terrible waste of energy and actually quite like a traumatic thing because, as was mentioned, concrete's got this huge embodied energy. And then we made this, this was I wanted to explore with the tectonic on each of the shapes. So this is the parking structure and the office above. And you'll note how the module changes as you go up. Like the gaps are wider at the bottom than they are at the top. And that's because the engineer arrived on site one day and he said, this thing's not going to stand up. So make them overlap a little bit more. And the floors in here were supplied by Forbo, which is an international company, and we imported them. And they were really worth the wait, but it took excruciatingly long. It was during COVID. And there was no your ports are all shut here, so it took forever to get this stuff through. And but it's beautiful, this floor. It's pink. It's got a little glitter in it, and it was worth the wait. And that shelf that you see there behind the bed, that wasn't on the drawings. That's site tolerances, like you're drawing it 1:100, and then the thing comes out 100 times bigger, and any margin of error, there's no more surface for that bed to go up against. So that kink in the wall was not meant to be where it was. On the drawings, the bed fit perfectly. And then we had to resolve that and talk the clients down from the ledge and field late-night phone calls. And aluminium contractors ran a mile from this project because no one wants to bend lengths of aluminium, and no one wants to make trapezoidal windows, and it was really hard to find guys to do it. And they were actually right, because I got this text one day. Anyway, everybody was fine. Everybody was fine. She had a cut on her finger, but that's what happened, because when you're opening a trapezoidal window, you don't realize that it's actually narrower at the top. You think you've got a lot more to travel, and so you're still moving it, and the whole thing popped off the rail and then fell out. Anyway, the trapezoids were the client's idea, so it was fine. Yeah, just interior shots. It was a successful house. I mean, they really love it. And then you get comments like this on the internet, which I love. And then similar to where we are today, I'm building a lot in complexes in Joburg. Joburg's full of this kind of living. And we wanted this really pristine, minimalist, white object. Like here, I'm sure, the estate rules, aesthetics committees, and everything has to be run through a set of guidelines. And one of the guidelines here was that you had to have a mix of materials, and 40% of the wall surfaces had to be of either face brick or a stone cladding. And we wanted the white object. So what did we do? We used a lot of face brick on the plinth. And then we hid all the face brick around the back, so you can't see it from the street. And we had lots of meetings. This is not in the spirit of the rules. So rewrite your rules. We're doing it. And we concealed gutters and every window, and making things that appear like they have no details actually requires the most amount of details. That's what I learned here. I mean, to conceal a skirting, because you need a skirting, otherwise the edges of the room just look terrible. But to conceal a skirting, you have to bend up channels, and to conceal windows, you have to make all cavities in the walls for them. And to conceal a gutter, you need a bent up, flashing. That's completely seamless. This thing is welded. It was super expensive. It was belts and braces, and let's build it all the way to the edge and make sure that if it fills up, the water's only going to run in one way. It's going to run out. It can't run into the house. And it still leaked. Can you believe it? I think there was like a few millimeters of tolerance on the plasterwork, and somehow when the water, in a huge hailstorm, the water, when it ran over the edge, still got in through a crack in the plaster. We fixed it, but it's just very surprising. And then, we're prototyping all the time, so the research is not only happening on the site in situ, we're making things, we're making furniture, we're making rings at the scale of the hand, we're making things at the scale of the body, we're testing how thin you can pour a piece of concrete, we're making things in the garden. So this was a braai we made using rammed earth. And then we sealed the rammed earth, and then I wasn't happy because it wasn't failing in any way, so I cut the corners, and then we wanted to see if that would erode with the rain, and it did, and then we plastered it. So. And I also do a bit of teaching. I teach at the GSA at UJ, University of Johannesburg, and I don't know if any of you know about the Graduate School of Architecture. We have one of our alumni in the audience. You can go and ask him about it, but it's a very interesting setup. It's not a normal university setup for architectural education. We have units with particular interests. My interest has always been in materials and methods. And so we're doing like kind of more extreme experiments in this environment. And there's some very interesting testing and researching. It's kind of a lab for this kind of research. So we're looking at how traditional weaving might be made at a larger scale as a self-supporting structure. Basket weaving being turned into like really viable, quite strong structures. Making a modular system for rammed earth using an adder bin. Work hardening aluminium cans to make structures. This is all the wonderful work happening still at UJ currently with the master's students. We're baking recycled plastics to make a cladding for buildings. And these are the recipes. And the student really presented himself as Martha Stewart, which I thought was quite a clever choice. And the olfactory in architecture, this idea of scent and how important it is to the way that we experience spaces. Expanding foam as a way of making rapid housing in emergency situations. Using a form of calcification that's taken from termites, how their saliva hardens sand. So similar to what we saw in that application of sand in the 3D printing, we're actually experimenting with the recipes for hardening sand, and then thinking through what we can do with our mining landscape, the mine dumps in Joburg, and making those kind of productive spaces. Once you know how to harden sand, you can make spaces in the mine dumps. And project looking at kintsugi, which is this Japanese technique of repair, and looking at all those concrete brutalist buildings that the apartheid government put up in Joburg, and how we can kind of rethink those buildings as part of our cultural heritage. During COVID, we had a student who was looking at all the glut of vacant offices and saying, what can we do with all those partitions and the materials that come out of those partitions when they're demolished, and trying to make other viable structures just using drywall studs. And these are some of the proposals. A sonic landscape that's very analog, that you can transport sound across a space. And looking at the tacit knowledge that construction workers have and how much we can learn from them as designers. Choreographing the site. And this is a project about dune formations. It's called aeolian processes, where wind sweeps sand and makes sand dunes. And the student thinking about how simple interventions might create new morphologies using wind and sand. Okay, so that was, I sent the wrong slide deck, but that was okay. So I just wanted to mention that this was the next generation of architects that are dreaming about how we make architecture in the future, And these are just a few of the incredible ideas that have emerged from the students over the past few years. And that's me in a nutshell. And I thank you for all paying such good attention. And there'll be time for questions afterwards, as I understand it. Thanks so much, everyone.